Hi, this will be ILV number 5 with Meg and Marissa. We will be going over a dogfish shark in objectives. 1, describe the digestive system anatomy of the shark, explaining how this is related to the mode of locomotion and ecological niche of a shark. Number 2 is to describe the circulatory system of a shark, explaining the chambers of the heart and blood flow pathway. Number 3 is to describe the systemic circulation of the shark, explaining how the arteries are arranged to transport blood from the gills to the rest of the body and back to the heart, and identifying the key vessels in your description. Number 4 will be to explain how sharks eliminate waste, including a description of the kidney anatomy. And lastly will be number 5, explaining how sharks reproduce, including a description of the female and male shark reproductive anatomy.
For objective number 1, I will describe the digestive system anatomy of the shark. So, to start, we have 2 rows of functional, triangular, serrated, polyphyodont teeth. And then the oral cavity here extends from the lingual surface of the teeth to the level of the spiracle. The hyoid arch supports the oral cavity, and the raised floor here of the oral cavity is the tongue, which isn't a true tongue because the structure does not have muscle. Then we have the pharynx, which is the space that extends from the spiracle opening to the esophagus. And then we have our stomach here, which is this S-shaped, J-shaped elongated structure. The pyloric sphincter controls the passage of food from the stomach into the duodenum, which is the very short proximal portion of the intestine. Food then moves into the valvular intestine, which contains a spiral valve. The spiral valve greatly increases surface area. Remnants of digestion then move into the distal portion of the intestine. We have the rectum, which is terminated with an anus here, opening into the cloaca. And then we have this finger-like rectal gland that opens into the rectum, and it secretes a high sodium chloride solution into the rectum, which aids in osmoregulation. Here is our liver, and this is a large derivative of the primitive gut. This is the left, right. Bile duct is here, and the bile is secreted by the liver and delivered to the gallbladder, and then the bile duct leads from the gallbladder to the duodenum. The pancreas empties into the duodenum, and it releases digestive enzymes and insulin. And then we have the spleen, which is a large gray organ and is a lymphoid tissue, which is important to production, storage, and destruction of erythrocytes. In relating to how the mode of locomotion and ecological niche is for a shark, we know that the liver is advantageous for aquatic vertebrates because it reduces its density and approaches neutral buoyancy. They store oils in the liver to reduce their body density. There are also papillae and rugae, which are characteristics of the stomach, and these allow animals to overfeed to expand the stomach. And those are some ways that this is related to the mode of ecological niche for a shark.
So now we move into objective number 2, which is describe the shark's circulatory system, explaining the chambers of the heart and blood flow pathway. So we're going to take a look inside here. So this is our heart. The dogfish shark has a single single circulatory system. And so what we know is that the deoxygenated blood only flows up from the body. It enters here through the sinus venosus and moves to, you can see these two kind of purple looking structures. It's actually one structure, and it is the atrium. So the blood flows from the sinus venosus into the singular atrium, which then flows into the ventricle right here. And from the ventricle, it moves up into the conus arteriosus, where all of this deoxygenated, it then flows into the lungs, where it will then become oxygenated and be pushed back into the body to restart the process.
For objective number 3, I will describe the systemic circulation of the shark and explain how the arteries are arranged to transport blood from the gills to the rest of the body and back to the heart. The conus arteriosus flows blood into the ventral aorta, and this whitish tube here branches off into 5 afferent branchial arches. So in here, we have the ventral aorta, and it would branch off into 5 afferent branchial arches. And the branchial arches pass it off into the gills. Blood from the collector loops flows through 4 efferent branchial arches, and their convergence forms the dorsal aorta. The internal carotid arteries up here are formed by the hyoidine arteries that join with the paired dorsal aortae. And this artery passes through the carotid foramen of the chondrocranium to supply blood to the brain. The celiac artery is the most cranial, that arises just after the dorsal aorta and enters the pleuroperitoneal cavity. The gastrohepatic artery gives rise to the gastric and hepatic arteries. The hepatic artery turns cranially, coursing alongside the common bile ducts, and enters the liver. And the gastric artery divides into a dorsal and ventral gastric artery, and it supplies the dorsal and ventral portion of the body of the stomach. And the anterior intestinal artery gives off ring-like branches to the valve and supplies the internal anatomy of the intestine. After flowing through the kidney, blood flows the tail is drained by the caudal vein that lies ventral to the artery in the humeral arch. Renal portal veins are caudal veins at the anus that pass laterally and dorsally to the kidney here. And it sends blood through the kidney. So it's not quite apparent in the actual specimen here, so I drew a quick little thing. So here we have the liver, and this is our renal portal vein. This is our caudal vein down here. After flowing through the kidney, blood flows into the posterior cardinal veins, which widen into the posterior cardinal sinuses. So on either side of the dorsal aorta, we will have the posterior cardinal veins, and then further up here, we have the posterior cardinal sinuses. And then drainage of the head region is associated with the anterior cardinal sinuses located dorsal to the gill arches. Up here. Venous blood from the capillaries is transported to the liver. The liver has access to all chemical substances transported from the viscera. The hepatic portal vein is composed of the gastric vein that is formed by the dorsal and ventral gastric vein that drain the stomach, and the lineomesenteric vein that drains the right side of the valvular intestine. And the anterior intestinal vein here, this drains the right side of the valvular intestine, and the lineomesenteric vein drains the spleen and the stomach. Lateral abdominal veins on either side here receive blood from adjacent trunk areas, and then hepatic arteries up in here course alongside the bile duct and enters the liver. A little bit of a different view here. This is the sinus venosus. This is our liver. The hepatic vein will be right here. For objective number 4, I will explain how a shark eliminates waste, and I will include a description of the kidney anatomy. The purpose of the urinary system is to purify the body of its nitrogenous waste. Opistonephric kidneys are elongated, brownish, strap-like organs against the dorsal wall. It extends almost the entire length of the pleuroperitoneal cavity. In both males and females, the caudal portion is urinary in function. In males, the anterior end of the kidney has no urinary function but contributes to the reproductive fluid. The kidney is drained by the archinephric duct, and in a mature male, the duct is modified into a reproductive duct with no urinary function. And then urine is drained from the caudal end of the kidney through an accessory urinary duct into the cloaca. And in females, the caudal portion empties into the cloaca through the urinary papilla.
Now will be objective number 5, which is explain how sharks reproduce. Include a description. So these claspers will tell us that this is a male of the female and male shark reproductive anatomy. So we will look at male anatomy first. In the male, the primary sex organ is the testes, seen here, which are supported the mesorchium, which you can see here. Sperm are conveyed from the testes and move down to the seminal vesicle right here, which terminates in the sperm sac, which is bilobed right here, and engage in reproduction, releasing the sperm into the female. So now we will talk about the female shark reproduction, which is suspended by the mesovarium. Ovulation results from the rupture in the wall of the ovary, and the rupture releases a mature ovum through the ostium tube into the oviduct. And this oviduct is where fertilization occurs before it moves to the uterus.